It was the kind of wind that didn't just move the trees, it remembered things. A boy named Cale stood at the edge of the cliff behind his village, where the old stones whispered when the night grew too quiet. He was 14, barefoot, and clutching something tightly in his hand, a small glass vial filled with ashes. Not just any ashes. These were from the final fire of his mother's lantern. She had died weeks ago, leaving behind a final message. When the wind carries the last flame to the mountain, you'll know. Cale didn't know what it meant, but the wind tonight felt different. It wrapped around him like a voice that couldn't speak. The bottle warmed faintly in his grip. Behind him, the village bells rang. A storm was coming, but the sky wasn't dark. Instead, high above the horizon, a line of light, faint, silver, and trembling, stretched across the clouds like a path drawn by memory. And at the very center, something burned. Something not made by flame. That night, Cale didn't sleep. He sat on the floor beside the window of the room he used to share with his mother. The blanket over his shoulders smelled faintly of rain and old wood. The vial of ashes rested between his palms, its glow now barely visible, like it was saving its strength. His mind kept circling back to the line in the sky. Why now? Why only after her last lantern was extinguished? He remembered how she used to speak to the fire when she thought he wasn't listening. Not with words, but silence. A kind of reverence, as if every flame held something ancient. Now the ashes were all he had left. Just before dawn, the glow returned, brighter, steadier. Cale stood up, and the vial cracked. Not shattered, not broken, but opened, like a seed splitting from within. From it, a flame rose, but it didn't burn. It hovered in midday, trembling like it wasn't sure if it should exist. Then it flickered once and moved. Not upward, not sideways, south, toward the old path that led into the forest. Cale stared. The flame paused in the air, almost waiting. And Cale did the only thing that made sense. He followed. Cale followed the flame into the forest, where the trees stood like old listeners. They didn't move with the wind. They didn't creak. They only watched. The path beneath him was barely there, covered in moss and scattered leaves that hadn't been touched in years. Yet somehow, his feet knew where to go. The flame didn't light the forest. It didn't need to. Its glow was not for vision, it was for memory. As Cale walked, the forest began to change. Small things. The trees bent slightly in his direction. Rocks had strange carvings in them, symbols he couldn't read but felt familiar. A flower bloomed where his shadow passed, then withered when he stepped away. And then, he heard it, a voice, not from outside, but inside the flame. A woman's voice, soft, like it had waited patiently for years. Cale. He froze. No one had said his name like that since. The flame floated closer to his chest, then pulsed. And in the air before him, a small ripple appeared, like the world had blinked. The trees opened into a hollow, and in its center stood an old well made of stone. On its surface, moss and ash had intertwined, and carved above its arch was a single word: return. Cale stepped closer to the well. The carved word return seemed to hum softly in his bones, even though no sound touched the air. The flame floated still now, as if waiting for his choice. He looked down. There was no water, only depth, only darkness, only memory. He reached out and touched the stone. It was warm, impossibly so for something covered in ash and moss. And in that moment, the wind moved. Not around him, but through him. He saw a flash, a pair of hands, his mother's, braiding strands of his hair when he was small. A lullaby hummed in a language he'd nearly forgotten. The scent of firewood, the softness of sleep. Then it was gone. The flame flickered, and the ashes inside the vial began to stir. He opened it without knowing why. Slowly, carefully, and as the golden ash drifted into the air, it didn't fall into the well. It rose. It swirled gently upward, forming a shape above the mouth of the well, faint, glowing, like smoke given memory. It was a face, eyes closed, peaceful. Cale's hand trembled, and he fell to his knees. "I remember you," he whispered. The face opened its eyes, and they were his. The face hovered silently above the well, faint as breath, real as memory. It looked at Cale not with fear, nor with love, but with understanding. As if it knew, as if it had waited. Cale couldn't breathe. The ash still shimmered faintly in the air, forming strands that drifted toward him and then away, dancing in a pattern too old to name. Then the face, his own, yet not, spoke, but not with words. It spoke with feeling, with the weight of night spent searching, with the sharp edge of silence after loss, with the soft hope of a name spoken in the dark. Cale's eyes filled with tears. He had never cried since the fire. Not once. Not when they carried away the lost remnants of the village. Not when they said no one had survived. Not even when he found the vial in the ashes. But now, as the ashes rose, as they became a reflection of his possible self, something inside him cracked. Not broken, opened. A wind moved again, slow and sacred. And from the ashes, a whisper finally came. Not loud, not fearful, only one word. Remember. Then the face dissolved, scattering into the sky like stars too tired to stay. Cale closed the vial slowly, and the world felt less empty. The forest no longer watched him with silence. It listened. Every step Cale took, the ground gave way not with resistance, but reverence, as if the soil itself remembered him. The trees creaked in low, harmonic sighs. Leaves shimmered in rhythms too ancient for melody, yet he understood it in his bones. He followed no path. He simply walked where the ashes seemed warmest in his pocket. Eventually, he came to a clearing. At the center, a giant tree with bark like weathered stone and roots that coiled into the earth like 1,000 sleeping arms. Cale had never seen this place before, but he knew it. The air was thick with golden motes of light, like memory trapped in dust. And then he heard it. Music, not from flute nor drum, not from any voice. It came from below, from deep beneath the roots. A song of something forgotten but not gone. A lullaby with no words, meant for those who once wished before the world taught them not to. Cale knelt and placed his hand on the roots. Warm, alive, the vial in his pocket pulsed, and the tree responded. The roots shifted gently, and the earth cracked open. not to swallow him, but to show him something long buried. Beneath the ice, it was warm, not the warmth of fire, but of breath, of presence. Kale stepped down into the hollowed space under the roots, where the walls pulsed faintly with veins of silver light. The ice shimmered like mist woven with memory. The roots above curled like the ribs of some ancient beast long asleep. In the center of the chamber stood a stone basin, and floating just above it, the ashes, not the ones in Kale's pocket. These shimmered with a dim glow of remembrance, suspended in stillness as if held by invisible hands. They swirled slowly, like smoke caught between time. Kale stepped closer, and his vial pulsed again, its light answering the one before it. Then something changed. Not in the room, but within him. He saw it all. A boy running through meadows. A girl's voice calling him back. A mother's hands wrapping a ribbon around a gift. A final promise whispered in the dark. When the light returns, so will I. Tears welled up before Kale understood why. He dropped to his knees. The memory wasn't just the forest's. It was his. And the ashes were not a relic to protect. They were a piece of someone who had once made a wish in his name. The silence held him, cradled him, and let him remember. Kale emerged from beneath the roots just as the first light touched the tops of the trees. But the forest had changed. It no longer whispered. It breathed. The wind bent the grass with reverence, and the birds stayed silent, as though they too remembered something lost. In Kale's chest, the glass vial no longer burned. It hummed. Before him lay a narrow path he hadn't noticed before, made not of stone or date, but of petals, pale gold, fallen from trees that had not bloomed in 100 years. At the end of the path waited a river, wide, still, glowing faintly with the same silver light that had marked the sky. And standing at its edge was the figure of a woman. Kale could not see her face, only her outline in the glow, long hair lifted gently by the wind, her hand outstretched toward the river's center where a stone platform hovered inches above the water. Without knowing why, Kale walked forward, step by step, until he stood beside her, his hand still holding the ashes that had started all of this. The woman turned to him, not with eyes or voice, but with presence. She had waited, and the river, too, had remembered.